uh, at this time, I'll turn it over to you there, Prashant.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. Just a little bit about, most of you know a little bit about ourselves. My name is Prashant Kumar, and, Ed Moselle is my partner in crime. We are multifamily syndicators. We live in Long Island, and last year we participated in about 1,200 units in GP capacity. Overall, we are very aggressive in terms of acquisition, but based on what's going on outside right now, we are, just taking it's a little easy, like everybody else, evaluating our options. And during that lull time, we thought of having, extending our knowledge in the industry with everybody else, with our friends, just networking. And today's our first webinar. We are restarting it, and Eric Oliver from Cost Segregation graciously accepted our invitation. Cost Segregation Authority has been performing cost segregation studies since 1999, and Eric has been with cost segregation for some time. He has helped us on many projects. The reason I am kind of attached with him is because he used to live here in Long Island, Medford, and now he has moved to Salt Lake City, Utah. Eric himself holds Bachelor of Applied Science in accounting, and he has done some work here in Long Island, and after that he moved with Cost Segregation Authority. He's very much into networking and in these educational events. So I'll let Eric talk to everybody from now on. Eric, welcome.
All right. Thank you, Prashant. I appreciate it. Go ahead here. Thank you guys for having me. I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen. Just give me 1 second here. We'll get going here. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. There's a severe thunderstorm here in Salt Lake that's passing through right now. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Again, thank you, Prashant, and Ed for having me on. Looking forward to talking to you guys about the new CARES Act and some of the impact it's having on real estate investors. It's been a challenge for most of us, I can imagine, at least for me, even just working from home, trying to get kids through school, getting my job done. So we're looking forward to kind of going through this CARES Act, trying to give you guys some ideas on how to generate cash flow during these uncertain times to kind of help float the business while we weather this storm. So in saying that, we'll go ahead and get started. Let's see here. First thing I want to do is just show you a quick, I don't know why I always start with this little video here just to break the ice, but I don't know how many of you guys have played Monopoly, but I know at our house we've been playing a lot of games in the last 3 or 4 weeks with the kids, but this just goes to show you a little bit about tax. I'll go ahead and play it now. I don't know if you guys could hear that. Hopefully the little boy's voice, but unfortunately taxes is part of this real estate game. And so what we want to do is just kind of bring you up to speed on some of the new provisions in the CARES Act, as well as the 2008 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that would help us reduce our tax liability. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. Like Prashant said, feel free to raise your hand, or I guess we can't really raise. I think you actually can raise a virtual hand in this Zoom application, but if you want to send in a question, we'll be answering questions throughout. But really today's goal is just let's talk about these less understood tax strategies, kind of identify the different aspects of how they all play together. And that's the most important thing, is all these play together. And we want to see how they play together and how we can maximize those benefits for our business. And then really just illustrate what these laws mean for you guys as real estate investors. So the first kind of, like I said, I want to kind of really bring and focus in on how these play together. So we're a cost segregation company, and I'm going to touch a little bit on cost segregation, not to be self-serving, but to just, it is kind of the foundation of how these other Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the bonus depreciation, and then the CARES Act all play together and give us an opportunity to significantly increase cash flow. So as I'm sure most of you are aware, our current president is also a real estate investor. He owns a few properties throughout the country. And in the last 4 years, there's been some provisions that have come out that are very real estate investors. And that's kind of what we're going to touch on. So first we'll touch a little bit on cost segregation, just to get you guys up to speed, give you an understanding of what that is. Then we'll really dive into the bonus depreciation, because that's extremely significant, and then the CARES Act. So as most of you know, part of the reason we get into real estate is for the tax write-off. So depreciation is basically, we get to depreciate our buildings depending on the type of building, either over 27.5 years or 39 years. So 27.5 years for residential rentals and 39 years for commercial property, things like medical space, office space, retail, etc. So basically, to make the numbers easy, if you have a $270,000 residential rental, you're going to get about a $10,000 write-off every year for the next 27.5 years. That $10,000 write-off comes off of our taxable income and allows us to save tax dollars. So if I make $100,000 a year, I got a $10,000 write-off, I'm only going to be taxed on $90,000 this year versus $100,000, which is great. That's what we call straight line depreciation, and that's what most investors and their CPAs are currently doing, is straight line depreciation. You buy a property, you take the settlement statement to your CPA and you say, hey, I bought this property. They put that asset on your books as one big asset that you depreciate over 27.5 years. What we do is, in terms of cost segregation, is so when you buy a residential rental or a duplex or a multifamily, you're not only buying the land and the structure, you're also buying the cabinets, the lighting, the fixtures, all those different things. You're also purchasing those things. And so we come in and we segregate those out and we put a value to those, because the IRS allows us to depreciate our carpet over 5 years versus 27.5 years. So if I can identify that I've got $5,000 worth of carpet in my structure, I now get to depreciate that $5,000 over 5 years versus 27.5 years. So that's really what cost segregation is at the highest level. We're basically reclassifying the different components of your building. I was actually sitting through a presentation on cost segregation, and they used a great analogy of a Big Mac. So you've got a hamburger, that's your straight line depreciation. And what we do, you know, your hamburger is $3.99. What we do is we say the bun is 50 cents, the lettuce is 25 cents, and we break those different components out, still coming up to the $3.99 for the whole burger. But now we've broken up and sliced out each different component of that burger. Same thing we're doing with your buildings. And so this is a little high level overview kind of on what cost segregation is. Oftentimes we get asked, is this some kind of tax loophole? No, it's not. The IRS is 100% behind it. They actually have an IRS audit guide that we have to follow. And this quote is from that audit guide. It says, it's desirable for taxpayers to maximize personal property in order to accelerate the depreciation deductions and reduce tax liability. Again, we're just picking apart, pulling out the personal property and depreciating it at a faster pace. There's 3 real tests to this, because I don't want to bore you with this stuff. And in saying that, I appreciate you guys being on. You guys are dedicated to your trade. If you're here on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock for most of you on the East Coast, learning about tax strategies, so I appreciate that. But we won't bore you too much, but just wanted to give you an idea of what qualifies as personal. First one is if the property can be removed without damaging the building. So again, you think about cabinets, you can take that stuff out without the building falling apart. The second rule being if the relationship or machinery is so close to, and what that really means is a lot of people don't understand this, but you have appliances in your multifamily. Appliances are 5-year assets. Appliances, you might have some specialty plumbing going to the washer and dryer. that plumbing and that circuit breaker are the only reason you have electricity in your laundry room. And so we get to segregate out portions of the electricity and the plumbing as well and put that in as a 5-year category versus a 27.5-year category. It would be the relationship between the asset and the nature of the business is unique. You don't see a lot of that in multifamily. That's more things like gas station, the canopies, clean rooms, air conditioner, and short-term asset lives. But if you have an air conditioner in a server room and the only purpose for that air conditioner is to keep those servers cool, we may be able to classify kind of the 3 main rules. Here are the different categories. So typically on your left is your 39 or 27.5-year property. So this is walls, doors, windows, HVAC, plumbing and electrical. That stuff remains at a 39 or 27 schedule. You also have your land improvements. So things like parking lots, curbs, gutters, asphalt, retaining walls, trees and shrubs. When we do these studies, we actually go around and count the trees and shrubs and figure out those are all, we put a value to each of those trees and shrubs, and you're able to depreciate those over 15 years versus the 27.5 years. And then the last category is your 7 and 5-year assets. Those are things like carpet, countertops, cabinetry, auxiliary lighting. There's a whole laundry list of these things, but that's basically what it is we're looking for when we're doing this segregation to help accelerate the depreciation. Here's just a quick slide on what the average properties. I know most of you guys are into multifamily. Like I said, multifamily are great properties for cost segregation because we simply can reclassify more in an apartment or a multifamily setting than in, let's say, an industrial setting or a warehouse. Looking at an apartment building, for example, there's a lot of personal kitchens that all have countertops, cabinets, appliances. These multifamily, single-family homes have a lot. Resegregating about 35%. So again, if you buy a $100,000 duplex, we're going to come in and reclassify into shorter asset lives that you then get to depreciate faster. And we'll jump into some case studies here, actually right now, to kind of show you and illustrate how that works. So this is an example of a residential assisted living home, and the acquisition cost minus the land, so you don't get to depreciate the land value. So this was probably purchased for, let's say, $1.6 million, but we pulled out $400,000 for the land, which gives you a depreciable basis of $1.2 million. It was purchased in 19, and the current tax year is 2019. We go in, we do our cost segregation study, we identify things, carpet, countertops, again, ceiling fans, plumbing. We go out to the outside, we look for things like retaining walls, etc. And basically, at the end of the day, this is what a simulated depreciation schedule might look like. So over on the left-hand side, you'll see depreciation without cost segregation. That is your straight line depreciation. So that is, I buy the building, I take my closing statement over to my CPA, I'm going to get about a $43,000 write-off every year for the next 27.5 years. So again, significant, that's great. If I have 150,000 of income, I'm only going to be taxed on about 107 of that because I get a $43,000 write-off. So that's a great opportunity there to use depreciation in a real estate setting. However, if we were to do a cost seg study, you'll see down at the bottom those percentages where we've basically segregated out about 27% into shorter asset lives. So 8% goes into the 15-year category, 1% into the 7-year category, and 18% into the 5-year category. At the end of the day, we're still depreciating 1.2 million. It's just that we're taking, roughly 27% of that and depreciating it at a much faster rate. And what that does is, the results of that is you now have an increase in depreciation in the first year of about $43,000. So if you take that $43,000 of increased depreciation times your tax bracket, that's about a $17,000 tax savings. You take that over a 5-year period, you're going to increase your depreciation over 5 years at $196,000, which is about a $70,000 tax savings. And so again, if I'm going to go back to one slide here, but you can see in my 5-year property, I'm depreciating that $216,000 over 5 years. You'll see it says 43,200, 69,120. Again, you'll see that's depreciated over those 5 years versus the whole 27.5 years. So significant difference, and that's on a $1.2 million building. You're going to have about a, at the end of the day, about a $70,000 tax savings. So that was, I bought the property in 19. I did the cost seg study in 19, and that was kind of an example of that. Now oftentimes we get asked, well, Eric, I bought my property in 14. Am I still eligible for cost segregation? Can I still accelerate it? And the answer is yes, you could do that. It's called a look back or a catch-up study. And the IRS allows us to do this without amending any tax returns. There's a form that we have to fill out. It's Form 3115, and we provide it to you and your CPA. And basically what it does is it allows you to take all the depreciation that you could have taken from 14 to 19. It allows you to take that missed depreciation and drop it on your current tax return in 19. And so let's kind of walk through an example of that. You'll see here on this slide, you've got 2014 to 2019. That red circle that's vertical, you'll see that's all the depreciation you could have taken in 14 through 19. Now you only took the 43,000 over on the left. You took your straight line depreciation, took 43,000 every year. We could have taken those numbers in the red circle. And so the difference is that 203,747. So again, we bought this is on a $1.2 million property bought in 14. You bought a $1.2 million property in 14, and you get to take a $203,000 depreciation expense on your 19 taxes.
So Eric, I have a question here. Sorry to stop you.
No,
so what is the difference? So what is the difference of what you are talking about and the bonus depreciation? Are these two different things?
They are, and actually I think it's the next slide. It's a great segue because we're going to get into bonus and how that works. So all these numbers I'm giving you right now are without the bonus depreciation. And so once we talk about bonus, it's like all this stuff is put on steroids and amplified 10 times. But just wanted to give you kind of a good framework of what cost segregation is, and we'll jump into bonus here in just a second.
And one more thing, for everybody's sake, that we plan to send these slide deck to everybody. So even if you cannot take any notes, it doesn't matter. You will have these slides because we have your emails now.
Perfect. Thank you, Prashant. I forgot to mention that. So yeah, please don't feel like you have to hurry and jot this down in between your dinner here. Just you don't have to take notes. We'll get you these slides. So, but again, on this example, all that missed depreciation in that red circle, 203,000, what that results in is about an $81,000 tax savings in the first year. Now, again, that number may go up or down depending on your tax bracket. The main thing is that 203,000, take that times your tax bracket, and that would be your actual tax savings. So again, you don't have to do it in the year. If you've got properties, if you're paying taxes this year and you own real estate, you may have an opportunity to go back and look at some of those properties you purchased in previous years and take those deductions this year. Again, doesn't require an amended return. All right, and this is just a quick example where we actually go through a residential rental. This is a $285,000 residential rental. Again, purchased in 14. We did the study in 19. On this property specifically, there was about a $48,000 increase in depreciation the first year, which resulted in a $19,000 tax savings. And just to give you an idea of how, the fee structure on that, you're going to save about $20,000, and the study is probably going to cost you $2,500. So you pay $2,500 to get the study done, and you could save up to as much as $25,000 in taxes in the first year.
So does it go by purchase price, or does it go by the value of the asset at the moment you are doing the cost segregation study?
It actually goes by the purchase price. So whatever you purchased it for, that's what your depreciable basis, even if it's gone up 3 times in value, your depreciable basis is what you purchased it for on the day of closing. So good question, Prashant.
Okay.
All right, so when would you do a study? We kind of talked about if you currently own a property, you can do a catch-up study. If you purchase an existing building, I would definitely look at it, especially if you're paying taxes. Renovate, remodel, or make any improvements to a building, especially significant improvements. We can segregate out those improvement costs. So let's say I bought a building 20 years ago for $500,000, and in 2019 I put $200,000 into remodeling it. We can take that $200,000 and segregate those numbers out and increase the depreciation that way as well. Before you sell a property, it's definitely worth looking at, and we'll kind of touch base on that. It's a little counterintuitive, but I think it'll make sense here in a second how that works. And then also, if you inherit a property or there's some type of step up in basis, that's another good time to take a look at cost segregation. All right, so we've talked about cost segregation. One of the things we often hear in our industry is, well, don't I have to pay all this back? And I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with tax, but when you sell a property, there's two types of taxes you pay. You pay a capital gains tax on the gain of the sale, and you pay a recapture tax on the depreciation you've taken. So think about that for a minute. I'm sitting here telling you to take all this depreciation, and then people will say, but Eric, I've got to pay that all back when I sell it. Isn't it just kicking the can down the street? Yes, you are kicking it. Pay it back in, let's say I own the building for 5 years. I bought it this year, did a cost seg study, took a bunch of depreciation as a write-off. When I pay that back in 5 years when I sell it, I'm paying it back at a lower rate on a lesser amount. So the recapture rate at the most is 25%. So if I'm at a 35% tax bracket, I'm going to take my deduction today at 35% and pay it back when I sell at a maximum of 25%. So that 10% difference or 5% difference, depending on your tax bracket, that's a permanent tax savings. So one, I've had the money to invest for, there's a time value of money aspect, but there's also a rate game that you're playing by taking your deductions at a higher rate and picking them back up upon sale at a lower rate. The third component, yeah, go ahead, Prashant, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question here. How is that 25% rate determined? I mean,
so 25%, it actually, you pay recapture on the 5 and 7 year components at your ordinary income rate. So if you're at a 22% tax bracket, you're going to pay it back upon sale at 22%. But if you're in a 35% tax bracket, the recapture rate can't go higher than 25%. And so it's based off your ordinary income rates is where that's calculated.
Are there any other nuances in that calculation, or, I mean, we end up doing...
Say that again,
Are there any other nuances in that calculation?
There are, and that's actually the third thing I'm going to get to here is the reduce or eliminate the recapture. So let me just kind of walk back here and talk about a scenario where we don't do cost segregation. You buy a property in 2015 for $500,000. You sell it in 2020, 5 years later, for $1 million. So you had a $500,000 gain over that 5 years. If you don't do cost segregation, you're reporting to the IRS that everything in your building went up or doubled in value, right? It went from 500,000 to $1 million. So you're basically saying my land went up, my land doubled, my walls doubled, my old dirty stinky carpet doubled in value, my old countertops doubled in value, and that's just not the case. Your personal property goes down in value, things like carpet, countertops, all that stuff goes down in value. Your land and your walls go up in value, but your personal property goes down. And so when you have to calculate this recapture tax, the rule states that you pay recapture on the gain of the sale or the depreciation you've taken, whichever is less. So if you don't do cost segregation, you're telling the IRS that there was a gain on your property. You're saying, I bought my property for $5,000, I sold it 5 years later for $10,000. And that's just not the case. So by having all these different components broken out, you're able to say, listen, IRS, my gain on my building was the land and the walls. It wasn't my personal property. So you actually get to reduce or eliminate the recapture tax on your 5 year components if you own the building for 5 years. Now, if you own it for 5 years, your 7 year assets still have a little bit of value left. And so there is going to be some recapture there, 2/7 basically, but your 5 year stuff is completely $0 book value. And so you don't have to pay hardly any recapture tax on that property. So it's a real important concept. I have another slide that I actually took out recently because it just gets a little bit too far into the weeds, but the main thing is you're not going to sell your carpet for more than you bought it for 5 years ago. If you can remember that concept, then I think you'll understand kind of how this recapture game works and how you can reduce or eliminate the recapture. So yes, you do have to pay recapture, but it's at a lower rate on a lesser amount at the end of the day. So, whoops. We're going to go back and skip the slide here. One last thing with the cost segregation study is there's a partial asset disposition component. And so this is great for multifamily apartment complexes, et cetera, who are constantly updating their units. But when you have each of these pieces broken out, let's say you've got a value for your carpet, a value for your countertops. Let's say after 3 years, I decide to take all my dirty carpet out and put new carpet in. That carpet still has some value left according to the IRS. It has 2/5 of its value left. And so by having these things broken out, you can then take what they call a partial asset disposition upon retirement of that property, and you get to write that off as an expense. So it's hard for CPAs to calculate this if you don't have it broken out in a cost segregation format. But if you replace your roof or your countertops or your cabinets or your flooring, by having a cost segregation study, you get additional benefits by retiring that equipment early and being able to write that off. So that's just kind of one of the added benefits I just like to mention. And all the cost segregation studies I've seen in the industry, they break this out by components so that if I replace my windows, I've got a value of what my windows were worth in my building, so I can see if there's any partial asset disposition available on those windows. But just kind of an added benefit. All right, so we've talked about cost segregation. We all kind of understand what that is, how it works, why it's beneficial. Let's kind of move forward now to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was enacted in 2018, well, the end of 2017, 2018. There's one main component which you touched on, Prashant, which is bonus depreciation. And this is huge. And this is probably the most important thing we'll talk about tonight, even more so than the CARES Act, because this was significant in increasing the amount of depreciation you can take. And we'll kind of walk through that. So bonus depreciation, what it is, and I don't think bonus depreciation, when they first came out with it, I don't think they ever thought about real estate, to be honest with you. One of the original requirements was that the asset had to have a recovery life of 20 years or less. And as we talked about, real estate has a recovery life of 27.5 years or 39 years, right? And so, but now all of a sudden you've got a whole bucket full of 5-year assets, right? 5 years qualifies for bonus. 7 years qualifies for bonus. Your 15-year category qualifies for bonus. The only thing that doesn't qualify is your 27.5 or 39-year stuff. And so every year they would kind of use this bonus depreciation as kind of a stimulus to help stimulate growth in the economy and say, basically, if you go out and build a new building or buy a new bulldozer, we're going to let you take 50% of the depreciation in year 1, and the other 50% will be divided over the useful life of the asset. So a couple rules with bonus depreciation under the old law is, one, it had to be original use property, which means you couldn't just buy a duplex. You had to actually build a brand new duplex, have a cost seg study done, and then whatever 5, 7, and 15-year property was broken out, you could apply the bonus depreciation. That was one rule. The second rule was it had to have a recovery period of 20 years or less. And so that was under the old plan. Now with the new plan, they got rid of the original use. Again, probably one of the most important things you'll learn tonight is it no longer has to be a brand new duplex. So I can go buy a duplex tomorrow that was built in the 1940s, and I am eligible for bonus depreciation. Huge benefit. The second thing is it's no longer 40%. You can see actually in 2019, it was actually a 30% bonus. So meaning you got to take 30% of the depreciation in year 1. Under the new law, it's 100% bonus right now. And again, that's huge. I keep saying huge, but it's a huge amount of depreciation you get to take in year 1. No longer has to be brand new property, and you get to take 100% bonus between now and 2022. So any properties you purchase between 9/27 of 17 and 12/31/22 are eligible for 100% bonus depreciation. After 2022, it starts to phase out in 20% increments until 2027. Now, depending on what happens in this year's elections and Congress and the Senate, that may change, but this is the current law that's on the books right now. So let's take that was my animation there at the top. Did everyone catch that? It only took me 15 minutes to figure out how to do that animation. So hopefully you guys caught that. I'm not very technically savvy, so, but it is super bonus. Don't Google the word super bonus. You're not going to find anything. We made that term up, but it's depreciation on steroids is what this new law has basically done. So let's take a look at that same $1.2 million residential assisted living home. Do you guys remember on that last slide, under the 5-year category, that $216,000, do you remember that was spread out over 5 years, the depreciation numbers? You now get to take 100% of that in the first year. Same thing with your 12-year, your 7-year property as well as your 15-year property. So now you're creating, you buy a $1.2 million residential assisted living home, you're going to have about a $339,000 write-off in the first year. Versus if you don't do cost segregation, in the old world, you would have had about a $43,000 write-off. So $43,000 write-off versus a $339,000. You're almost $300,000 more in the amount of depreciation you can write off in the first year. Take that number, times it by your tax bracket, that's $127,000 tax savings.
So I have a question. I have a question here, Rick. Very good example. So right now you are saying that we can sum up 5-year, 7-year, and 15-year and take $318,000 in first year. Is there a possibility that my CPA may choose to take 5-year this year, 7-year next year, and 15-year next following year, or anything like that?
There's a great way to, there's actually a couple ways you can manage this, because some investors will say, listen, I don't need a $330,000 write-off this year because my income's only $120,000. So the IRS knew that, and they allowed for, there's 2 ways to manage that. One is you can opt out by class life. So like you said, Prashant, I can choose to say, you know what, I'm only going to take the bonus depreciation on my 15-year. Most investors will take it on the 15-year assets because they're not going to own the property for 15 years. So they say, let me take all that in year 1, and then I'm going to let my 5-year stuff play out over 5 years, or my 7-year stuff over 7 years. That's one way. But you do have to, once you establish that, you can't then go back and say, well, I know I told you I wasn't going to take, but now I want to take it. No, once you establish it, you got to stick with it. And then the second way you can manage this is you can opt out of the 100% bonus and just say, you know what, IRS, I only want to take 50% bonus. And so that gives you a nice little bump in year 1, but then you still have some depreciation in future years to be able to write off. And so the nice thing is we work with your CPA and we determine what is your income level for this year and how do we manage this huge deduction? Because we don't want to, the one thing you don't want to do is wipe out all of your income, because you want to pay taxes at the lower tax brackets, especially if you're going to be in a higher tax bracket next year. Don't use these deductions to offset income that's taxed at 15%. Let's just get you out of those higher tax brackets. Let's get you down into a 15, 20% tax bracket, and then use some of that depreciation the following year to offset income next year. And so that's a great way to, but yes, you can absolutely manage that. You can kind of, between all the different methods, you can to offset pretty easily. So again, here's another example on a $500,000 residential rental. It's you buy a $500,000 residential rental today, and on your 2020 taxes, you're going to be able to write off $132,000 of income, roughly. $53,000. Again, bottom line is if you own real estate and you're paying taxes, you really need to have somebody look at this stuff to determine, are there ways for me to offset these taxes? All right, so.
Eric, I have a question.
Yeah.
All right, this is the dumb question category here. But let's say I have a syndication. I did a cost study segregation on the property, and I give my K1s out the first year. Each person can determine a different variety of ways to handle this, I assume.
Actually, no. So it does flow through on the K1.
Okay, so we have to pick one
Right.
and everybody gets
Yep.
that. Okay.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So, and that's a great question. The good thing is with this depreciation is you never lose it. So when you're talking syndication, there's no way to please everybody because you have some people with high income, some with low income. Some might qualify as real estate professionals, so they want all the depreciation in the world so they can offset their spouse's income. There's no way to, the most syndicators will just take as much as they can, give it out to their investors. Their investors will use what they can in a given year. And then anything they can't use will carry forward into future years. And we're going to get to that. I say that now, but actually we're going to talk about how that's not the case anymore under the CARES Act. So great segue there, Ed, into the CARES Act. We've now established what cost segregation is. We've talked about how the bonus depreciation has just put this method, this strategy on steroids. Now let's talk about it even another way with this CARES Act of how we can monopolize on this and turn it into cash flow. And there was a whole bunch of stuff that came out with the CARES Act, you know, PPP program, and we're not going to get into that today. But the main thing I want to talk about is qualified improvement property. We're going to talk about it a little, just because it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't apply to residential. So if any of you investors out there own commercial buildings, we're going to talk about it. But the most important thing is this 5-year net operating loss carryback. And let's just, we'll dive into that now. And we're all going to talk about 45L tax credits if we've got time here.
But before that, Eric, I have a question here on the chat window. Somebody's asking is, with regards to syndicated multifamily deal, is the depreciation split among all the partners based on ownership?
Yes, that's exactly right. So based on operating agreement, based on the agreement there, it will be split up amongst ownership. Correct.
Very good. Thank you. By the way, it was Lauren Jacobs who asked this question.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully we got that answered.
Yeah.
All right, talking about the CARES Act, we're going to talk quickly on the qualified improvement property. So back in 2018, when they were fighting over getting this tax plan approved, not approved, they couldn't agree on anything. They were just trying to get it rushed through. They made a mistake and they accidentally made what they call qualified improvement property a 39-year asset. So let me just give you the definition of qualified improvement property first. Qualified improvement property is improvements made to the interior portion of a building, which is non-residential real property. So in saying that, any of your multifamily, single family, those all are eliminated from this QIP benefit. But you think about if I have a dental office or a retail space, and I give, let's say I own a building and I have a dentist come in and I give a TI allowance to the dentist to say, hey, make this a medical space. Here's $200,000. The IRS is saying, because you're stimulating the economy by investing in that $200,000, we're going to let you depreciate that improvement, that qualified improvement property at a much faster rate. The problem with that is when they wrote the bill, they forgot to say that. They gave you the definition of qualified improvement property, but they forgot to say that it was a 15-year asset. So this was since a lot of people have been lobbying to get this changed, because if you go back and read the notes, they had every intent of making it a 15-year asset, but they just forgot to add the verbiage. So, and remember, if it went from a 39-year asset to a 15-year asset, all of a sudden, that's eligible for bonus depreciation. So instead of depreciating that $200,000 over 39 years, which would be, I don't know, I can't do the math in my head, 200,000 divided by 39, let's just say it's $2,000 a year, what have you, 6,000, what have you. Sorry, Prashant, I think you were on mute. Were you trying to?
About 4,000 per,
see?
About 5,000 per month.
5,000 per, see? Very good.
Yeah.
So instead of taking $5,000 a year for the next 39 years, this simple mistake, or when they fix the mistake, it allows you to take all 200,000 of it in year one. And so with the CARES Act, they were finally able to get that into there as a technical correction. And so if you have any properties that are non-residential that you made improvements to, chances are whatever that improvement cost is that you're capitalizing, you may be able to write that off in 1 year. Now, you can only go back 3 years because you have to you can only go back 3 years on this because you have to amend your taxes, but it's an opportunity for anybody, like I said, who owns that real estate that's non-residential. If you've made improvements, definitely talk to your CPA about this qualified improvement property, because you may have a big depreciation expense sitting there that you're not aware of. All right, let's talk about the 5-year carryback. So you guys said, Prashant, you'd asked a question about, or I think we talked about carrying these depreciation expenses forward. Under the CARES Act, they wanted to get money back in people's pockets right away. So they actually said, instead of carrying these losses forward, what if we let people carry them back to previous taxes that they paid in 14, 15, 16, and 17, and we'll issue them a refund. And so the net operating losses were around, they were eliminated with as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. They eliminated net operating loss, being able to carry them back 5 years, but they reinstated that with the CARES Act. So now you own property, you make $100,000 this year, you own a bunch of real estate, you do a cost sake study, we create a $400,000 write-off. One, we're gonna knock out your $100,000 of income for 2020. We're then gonna take that extra depreciation, that $300,000 that's left over, and we're gonna go recover or refund you for previous taxes you paid in previous years. All the way back to 2013 if you amend your 18 tax return. So great opportunity for you to possibly get some cash flow into your pocket immediately. And the other thing to consider here is the tax rate in 2018 was 35% versus a corporate tax rate of 21%. So the tax rates were higher back then. So not only do we get to carry it back, but we get to refund money that was taxed at a much higher rate, so our refunds are bigger. Whether you're a corporate tax rate or not, or individual tax rate, it doesn't matter, the tax rates were higher. So let's kind of walk through how this works. Here's a good example here. You got client A has 100,000 of income in 2020. Coronavirus hits, they didn't make as much this year. They're a little strapped for cash. Some of their rents didn't come in. They do a cost sake study. They got 100,000 of income. You do a cost sake study on their portfolio of properties, and we create a $525,000 depreciation expense. We do some look back studies. They bought some properties in 19 that are eligible for bonus depreciation. All of a sudden, we create a $525,000 deduction. In 2000, and they made $100,000. So we wipe out that $100,000. That leaves us $425,000 left. And you'll see that in the bottom there in parentheses on the left-hand side. We take that 425 and we go back to 2015. We wipe out that $75,000 of income, which results in about a $14,000 tax bill. We paid $14,000 in taxes, so we get that money back. And actually, I think there's a typo here. I think I put 16,606. It's supposed to say 14,606 on refund due there. I just noticed that. I'm like, why are those numbers not matching? But your taxes paid in 2015 is 14,606. Your refund should also be 14,606. Your taxes paid, so that leaves us, we wipe out 75,000 of our carryback, but that still leaves us 350,000. So now, 2016, where we made 150,000, we paid 35,000 in taxes. So now we get that 35,000 back as part of our refund. Then we go to 17. Now 17, we had a good year. We made 400,000. I've only got 200,000 left in my carryback bucket, but I get to offset 200,000 of that 400,000, which gives me $115,000 in taxes paid. I think that's a typo as well. I got to look at these numbers because that's an awful lot of tax paid on 400,000. No, that's actually probably right. That is right. So we paid 115 in taxes. I don't get all of that back because I only have 200,000 to use against that, but I do get 66,000 back. So at the end of the day, by doing cost seg this year, instead of taking that 425,000 and moving it forward for next year and next year and next year, I get to take it back and I get a $115,000 refund check from the government. Great opportunity for you guys if you're, like I said, if you've got rental properties and things are slowing down this year, you're looking for cash, it's a great way to generate cash flow. And I think, go ahead.
Does it mean that we have to go back and do the amendment to 15, 16, and 17 returns?
You
or
don't.
How does it work?
You don't. So you do have to, you have the ability to amend 18 if you want to take your operating loss in 18 because it's still in the 3-year window. But there's a tax form that you fill out where the IRS will have to give you the money within 90 days. I can't remember the name of the form, and I have the form written down here somewhere, but I'm happy to share it with anybody who wants it specifically. But your CPA will be aware of the form. But you basically, I think it's called a tentative refund form or something like that, but you're basically saying, hey, you guys owe me money, and by law, they have to issue that money in 90 days. And so it doesn't necessarily require an amended return, especially if you haven't filed your 19 taxes yet, and obviously none of us have filed our 20 taxes yet. So gives you a good opportunity there to generate cash flow to help get us through these uncertain times. So all right, so back to this slide. I just wanted to make sure, again, to kind of drive this home, all of these play together very nicely. You've got the cost segregation where we accelerate the depreciation. They rolled out the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which just puts that on steroids. And now we've got these, and before this CARES Act, we were creating deductions that people couldn't use. They were just having to push them forward. But now with the CARES Act, we're creating these massive deductions that people can now carry back and instantly within 90 days have this cash flow. And so it doesn't apply to everybody, the net operating loss carryback. There is some, one, you have to be a real estate professional return. If you're not a real estate professional, you may not qualify. The second one is if you're not a real estate professional, there is an opportunity there to group your activities. And if you've grouped them in a certain way, you may qualify. And we're happy to help anybody take a look at that, or you can talk to your CPA or your tax preparer on whether or not you're eligible. But if you can find a way to create these net operating losses for the current year. Okay, we've got a few minutes left here. I just want to kind of touch on one of the most overlooked tax credits for multifamily investors that's out there, 5L tax credit. It was just reinstated in 2017-18, now available to you guys again. But basically what it is if you remodel or build a new multifamily, single-family residential living center or home, and it is 50% more efficient than the 2006 standards, you may be eligible for a $2,000 per door credit. And this is a credit. This is not a deduction. This is a credit. Who qualifies for this? Home builders. It's basically whoever pays for the property. So if I'm a home builder and I build a bunch of properties and then sell them, me as the home builder, I get to take the credit. And people come to me and say, here's my plans, I want you to build this. They're the ones paying for it, so they get the credit. So that's an important distinction there. But apartment buildings, townhomes, condominiums, assisted living, student housing, single-family homes are all eligible for this tax credit. Some of the stipulations are, one, it has to be 3 stories or less. So if it's a sky rise or something, it doesn't qualify. But if you have a 3-story or less building, and it has to have been built or remodeled in the last 4 years to be eligible for the credit.
Is that a cost segregation study, or just a CPA would be able to file it for somebody?
That's a great question. It's not a cost segregation study, but there is a certification that you need to have in order to claim this credit. And it has to be performed by a third-party company. We do them here at our firm. There's a number of firms that do them, but you need to have the certificate. So it is similar to a cost seg study where they actually go out to the property. They do some air blowing tests where they blow air in and make sure no air is going out through the windows. They check the efficiency of some things, what kind of insulation you have in the building. They put all this information, they do some modeling, and it'll say, yes, this building is more efficient than it was in 2006, or no, it's not. And once you get that certificate with the report to back it up, then you can submit for the tax credit on your taxes.
And what is the cost of that study, Eric, typically per home?
Yeah, it's typically about $300 to $400 per door. So it's a $2,000 tax credit, and most companies are going to charge you between $300 and $400 per door.
Per door means per, like in California, these are assisted living facilities are 6-bed facilities. So are these 6 beds considered as 6 doors or one home?
I don't know the exact, I think there has to be, in order for them to qualify as individual units, there has to be somewhere in the units to cook. There's some certain criteria. I don't think most residential assisted living, they just have the rooms and then they've got one big kitchen. If it's a little more like private living where they've got their own kitchenette or sitting area to eat, then it may qualify. But there are some guidelines. That's a good question.
Right.
Here's some criteria here. I won't go through all these, but basically the big ones are, if you put in new HVAC, then it may qualify. The insulation is big. So if you're knocking down walls and putting in new insulation or new insulation in the ceiling, then that is a big factor in determining whether it'll qualify. And then the heating system as well. So those are the 3 big ones. There's some other things that will help. And we basically take all these different components, put them into a formula, and then it spits it out and tells us whether it's sufficient or not. But those are the big ones. Sometimes people will call me and say, I think I'm eligible for the credit. And I'm like, well, what did you do? And they're like, well, I put in new carpet and new appliances, and the appliances have the Energy Star rating on them. And that helps a little bit, but that doesn't get you to anywhere close to where you need to be. It's basically HVAC, windows, and insulation. If you do a combination of any of those 3, then you may qualify. And we'll always take a look at it before you ever engage us. We don't want you to pay us if you're not going to qualify, obviously. But good opportunity there. Some of the most common questions around this is, can a remodeling project qualify? I think I already answered that. The answer is yes. The definition is new construction. So when you remodel a existing multifamily home, that's considered new construction, and so it therefore qualifies. Can I apply for this tax credit for past properties I've built? Yes, you can claim it retroactively, but it can only be claimed for properties that were built in the last 3 years. So if you built an apartment complex with 200 units back in 2015, unfortunately, you're no longer eligible for the credit. Can I be the one to certify? Like I said, Prashant, that was a good question. No. Even if you are authorized, even if you do have the credentials to do it, you're not allowed to do your own property, obviously, for obvious reasons. You have to have a third-party independent company do your properties. And they have to be certified. There's certain qualifications that they need to hit. Certain software they have to use that's approved by the IRS to come up with these numbers. Is there a maximum number of units I can claim the credit for? No. Whether you have just a single-family home or 500 units, it doesn't make a difference. The one thing I'll say about the single-family homes, this type of qualification does require some significant equipment. And so most firms aren't going to travel across country and bring all their stuff to do a single-family rental home for $300. I mean, you'll be paying more in out-of-pocket costs than it's worth. So, but oftentimes, if you find local companies within your market, they may be willing to do some of the onesie, twosie type thing. But most national companies, they do have kind of a threshold of, it's got to be 20 units or more or 15 units or more. It's different for every company. But just be aware that if you've got some single family rental homes, it may be hard to find somebody to do this qualification unless you can find somebody local.
So Eric, just one question there. If we have a 500 unit apartment complex and we are doing very heavy lifting, we are changing a lot of windows and stuff. I mean, that means that they may end up qualifying for this credit then.
Correct. That is correct. Yep. And so what we usually would do is we'll ask for a copy of the plans or permits, that kind of thing, so we can get a good idea of what's going in, square footage, that kind of stuff. And then we can come back and say, yes, we're pretty confident this is going to qualify. The good news is we don't charge if it doesn't qualify. So we know pretty well beforehand whether it's going to qualify or not.
Yes, sir. Okay, Anton is asking, is there a minimum amount of a remodel capex per unit to qualify for 45L?
There's not. No, but what I found is if you're just, like I said, going in, repainting, putting some new carpet, maybe putting in some new appliances, maybe changing a window or two or putting in a window unit AC or something, it's probably not going to qualify. The ones that I've seen that really qualify is where you're going in and basically gutting it down, putting The biggest factor that makes the biggest difference is the insulation. So oftentimes when you're going in and just kind of doing a facelift on a property, you're not going to be knocking down walls and putting in better insulation. So that's kind of the criteria. I always have that stuck in my head that if you're not doing insulation, it's probably not going to qualify. But we want to look at it because maybe you put new windows, put a new HVAC, put in new ductwork. And there's so many different variables. I keep asking our 45L guys, I'm like, can I just get a checklist and say, hey, if you do these 3 things, then it qualifies. But we had one where we thought it was going to qualify, and we get up to the property and they put the ductwork in a crawl space. So even though they had these brand new HVAC systems and heating systems, they were pumping all this nice hot air right through the crawl space where it wasn't insulated. And so because the ductwork was in an unfinished area, it really lowered the ratings quite a bit. So again, it's kind of a case-by-case basis, and we're happy to walk through that with you guys on a case-by-case basis to see if you've got something you think might qualify. But I wish there was something hard and fast to say, hey, if you do these 3 things, it'll qualify. But every property is different. I mean, it depends on what type of slab it's on. It depends on the thickness of the walls. There's so many different variables that there's no one right answer. But another great opportunity to create some cash flow if you've got some of these properties that maybe you've remodeled or built in the last 3 years. So, all right, this is my last slide. So I don't know how we're doing on time. Looks like we're pretty good there. But basically, how do you proceed? Most cost segregation companies will do a free benefit analysis. So that's the same thing with us. We don't ever want to engage somebody if we don't think you're going to save money. So we'll take a look at it. We'll take a look at the bonus, depreciation. We'll also get your CPA on the phone to see if there's an opportunity for a net operating loss carryback. We want to partner with you and your CPA. So we do a free benefit analysis. All the information we need is here on the screen, basically either an existing depreciation schedule or those 4 pieces of information: when you bought it, how much you paid for it, the type of asset, and the address. And from there, we can run a benefit analysis. It will look similar to that green and blue spreadsheet that we provide, or we kind of ran through here, but it'll say, here's your straight line depreciation. Here's what we can increase depreciation by. Here's what our fee would be. And to give you guys an idea on fees, we always want to see somewhere between a 7 and 10x return on your tax savings and our fee. So if we're going to charge you $2,500 for a study, we want you to save $25,000 in taxes, give or take. Now, single family rental homes don't always get that. They might get 6 or 7x, but we want to see a significant a return on your investment. Single family rental homes will range anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500, $3,000. And then multifamily projects can be, $5,000 up to $20,000 for a big, huge apartment complex. So, but again, it's a fraction of what the tax savings is going to be. And so it's definitely the last thing I'll leave with is, if you ever question it, just call, because we'll run these analysis all day. And I would rather be told, hey, that's not a good candidate for cost segregation, than just not have the answers. So always consult with your CPA. A lot of CPAs, I should mention, your CPAs may or may not have heard about this. A lot of them have heard about it, but they don't have the expertise to complete it. So we partner with CPA firms all over the country as their cost segregation provider. And so talk to your CPA, call us, we'll give you the numbers. You can sit down with your CPA and run through the numbers, but always get the numbers ran just to make sure, see if there's an opportunity there. It doesn't hurt to run the numbers. So,
Hey, Eric, two last questions we have here. One is, how long does it take on average to do a cost seg study? Let's say it's a 100-unit apartment building, just for the sake of argument.
okay.
And is this invasive at all to the tenants, or what does that look like?
Yeah, great questions. So the studies themselves, just to kind of walk you through the process, the IRS does require us to do a site visit on every property. With multifamily properties, we just need to see, whoops, I guess I'm not moving enough. Hold on, my lights went off. I think they're on a timer. If I move, they might turn back on. There they go. On multifamily, we just need to see one of each floor plan. So if you've got 100 units, but there's only some 1 bedrooms and some 2 bedrooms, and the floor plans are all similar, then we just need to get into one bedroom and 1 2-bedroom apartment. The ones that are tricky are some of these older houses where they've been converted, or these older buildings that have been converted into apartments or 8-plexes where every floor plan is different just because of the structure of the building. Those ones are a little tricky. The site visits themselves take about 20 minutes per unit. So it's not totally, I mean, it's not a huge hassle, but that's probably one of the most difficult part of our jobs is coordinating these site visits. Getting with property managers or tenants to be able to let us in. Can be a struggle sometimes, but for most part, we don't have too many problems with it, but we are required to do a site visit. And then the second part of your question was, usually about 40 days from the time you engage us to do a study, we'll have a completed report to you in your CPA. And so, and a big portion of that 40 days is probably coordinating the site visit, because we fly all of our engineers out from Salt Lake, which is a hub for Delta. And we like to group projects in certain parts of the countries together so that, obviously for economies of scales and efficiency. So we wouldn't just fly to Long Island to do one project. We wait till we have 3 or 4 projects in New York, and then we hit them all at the same time on the same trip.
Gotcha. One other question, or last question, is solar. Now, how would that play into anything?
So solar plays into both cost segregation and the 45L tax credit. So solar is one of the things we look for when we do the 45L tax credit, because it does obviously make things more efficient. And so if you do have solar, you may be eligible for the 45L tax credit. And then in terms of cost segregation, the different components of the solar may be eligible for accelerated depreciation. So instead of having everything lumped together as one 27.5-year asset, we pull apart the different components that we can on the solar and move those to a shorter asset life.
Yeah, Lam is asking, what is the correct nomenclature? Is it called cost segregation, depreciation versus accelerated depreciation? What is the right terminology?
Cost segregation. So if you want to Google cost segregation, you'll get a billion articles on accelerated depreciation, but the correct terminology is cost segregation.
Very good.
Hi, I have a question. Someone
Yes.
asked about the number of units. What if they are single family homes that are rental units? Is there a minimum number that you come out for? And also, how long does it take? How long would it take for that?
Yeah, so single family, there's not a minimum. So we'll come out and we will do a single family rental home. The only challenge with that is we obviously don't want to just go send somebody out for one unit. So we wait till we have other units, but we do studies all over the country in all 50 states. So it might just extend the timeline a little bit if there's just one unit, just because we want to make sure it's cost effective for everybody. But we absolutely do one-offs all the time on single family.
So what is the, depending upon where it is, what is the minimum that you'll come out for us, that you'll come out for, or does it depend upon the location? Or
it depends upon the location. So, but like I said, the way we do it is it's all geographically aligned. So we'll do a Southeast trip, we'll do an East Coast trip, we'll do a Western trip, but so yeah, there's no minimum. If you've got one single family home and it qualifies and you're going to save tax dollars, we'll find a way to get the site visit done on one of our trips and get the benefit.
I guess what I was asking, if you have like 4 or 5 single
Yeah.
family.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if you have 4 or 5, we still want to group it. They don't take a whole lot of time. So we try to get at least 2 or 3 clients on a trip per trip, because we do pass that expense on to you in terms of out-of-pocket costs. And so we don't want you to have to foot a $600 airline ticket, but if you can split that $600 airline ticket amongst 3 or 4 people, that's more reasonable.
Makes sense.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Bonnie.
All right, Eric, Prashant and I would like to thank you very much, very, very much. And if anybody has any more questions, you could see how to contact Eric here. His email's right there. And anything else, Prashant?
No, it was actually great. Great having you, Eric, here today with us. so thankful to you. And as I said, you know, we are going to send these slides to everybody, you know, and if you guys have any questions, you know, reach out to Eric directly, or if you want to send us an email, you know, we can coordinate that. But, you know, we will just love to have you on other webinars in future.
All right, sounds good. Well, I appreciate you guys having me. Hopefully everybody learned something new. Again, please use this as a resource. We don't charge you an hourly fee to call us and ask us questions. And we're kind of in the trenches here when it comes into terms of tax. We work with CPAs all over the country. We're kind of on the edge of what CPAs are doing or different tax strategies. So if you find yourself in a bind where you've got a big tax bill and you own some real estate, feel free to give us a call. We're happy to give whatever advice we can, and kind of go from there. So please feel free to use this as a resource.
Very good, guys. Thank you so much again, and good night, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
All right,
guys.
thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.
Bye,
Likewise.
guys.
Night.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you, Anton.